first, if x and y are I1, they are unit root, there can be no relation between them. If they are not co-integrated. Okay, so the only way I1 variables can be related to each other is if they are co-integrated with each other. And the second thing follows from the first, which is that it is very important to test for co-integration. Okay, because for unit root variables without co-integration, if you do a simple OLS kind of regression, you will get spurious, meaningless results. Okay, so very important to test for co-integration. Now, what are the tests that we have learned for unit root and for co-integration? Well, the first test for the unit root, that's the ADF test. And when we apply the ADF test in the context of co-integration, we call that the Angle-Granger test. Okay, the only difference is that here in the first step, before we test for the unit root, we use OLS so that we estimate the betas so we can construct the residual. Okay, but otherwise they are exactly the same thing. If we have just one series, you're doing an ADF test. We have multiple series, you're testing for co-integration. First step is you do a regression to get the coefficients. Then from the coefficients you get the residual and the Angle-Granger test, basically applying the ADF test to the residuals of a co-integrating regression. Okay, now we also learned another test for unit root called the Phillips-Perron test. Okay. And in the context of co-integration, again, when you apply the Phillips-Perron test to the residuals of a co-integrating regression, you get the Phillips-Ouliaris test. Okay, so these are the names used in EBUs. Now, what is the difference between the ADF test and the Phillips-Perron test? Well, the ADF test is a parametric test. Okay, so it uses the lags, right? The lags of the first difference to correct for serial correlation, right? Using some criteria like the Schwartz information criteria or something like that. So this is a parametric test, okay? Because it corrects for serial correlation based on the addition of a number of parameters based on the lags. The Phillips-Perron test corrects for serial correlation in a non-parametric way. So this is a non-parametric test. Okay, the same properties will carry on in the co-integration context as well. Now, we learned one more test for co-integration, which was the Johansen test. So the Johansen test, there is no unit root counterpart. It's purely a test of co-integration. So I'll say a few words about Johansson test okay, so the good thing about the Johansson test, okay, so these first two tests, they are single equation tests. So Phillips-Odiaris and the Engel-Granger, they are both single equation tests. That means they are assuming that there is a unique cointegration vector in the data. Okay? 0 or 1. There's no cointegration. If there is a unique cointegrating vector. The Johansson test, on the other hand, allows for multiple co-integrating. Okay, so that's this thing about Johansson. However, the bad thing is it assumes normal distribution for the error terms. Okay, so it assumes the error terms have a joint normal distribution, and that assumption may not be very realistic. Okay, so we think of this as a strong assumption. It makes stronger assumption. Okay, and then if x and y are co-integrated, OLS is super consistent. But gives incorrect standard errors. And what that means is can't use OLS for inference. So for hypothesis testing, even if we do co-integration, we find x and y are co-integrated, we cannot use the OLS, even though it is super consistent, because the standard errors that OLS gives us are wrong. Okay, so for estimation and inference, we should use one of the following methods. You could use the Johansson, you could use fully modified OLS, you could use dynamic OLS, and you could use CCR, canonical co-integrating regression. Okay, so these are the methods that I showed you today. Okay, so that's kind of the big picture of what we have learned. Isn't it clear? Okay, good. So now we are ready to move on to the next topic. So the next 2 or 3 weeks we will focus on PPP and the real exchange rate. Okay? So let's start with that now. So today I've distributed to you a chapter from a book called The Economics of Exchange Rates, and this is on PPP and the real exchange rate. So PPP, as you all know, is the oldest theory about exchange rate determination, and there are many different shapes and forms that it takes. We will learn some of them. Okay, so what's the fundamental idea behind PPP? So PPP is saying that the exchange rate between two currencies should equate the two relevant national price levels if expressed in a common currency at that rate, so that the purchasing power of a unit of currency would be the same in both economies. So it's saying that if we have $1 and you're living in the US, how much you can buy with that $1, the purchasing power of that US dollar should be the same as if you convert that $1 into 7.8 Hong Kong dollars, with 7.8 Hong Kong dollars, what you can buy in Hong Kong should be the same as what you can buy with $1 in the US. Okay, so the purchasing power of two currencies should be the same. Okay, purchasing power parity. Parity means equality. So the exchange rate should adjust in order to equalize the purchasing power of different currencies. So how can we measure the purchasing power of a currency? If you have $1, how many goods and services can you buy with $1? How can we measure that? Consumption index. Yeah. So suppose you know the price index P, then what is the purchasing power of $1? Yeah, it's very close. So if you know the price level, the price level is related to the purchasing power, right? If you know the price level, how do you get the purchasing power? Inverse, okay? Inverse of the price level. So that's the idea behind PPP. Okay, so suppose PUS is the US price level, so that means it is the price of a basket of goods and services in the US. Okay, so this basket of goods and services, how do we determine that? Well, that depends. There are different kinds of price levels. So in the CPI, It is a basket of goods and services purchased by the average consumer. Okay, we're looking at the GDP deflator. It's the average basket of goods and services produced in that country. Okay, wholesale price index. There are so many different kinds of price indices, but basically that is measuring the cost. It's telling you the cost of an average basket of goods and services. And likewise, you have PHK. So this is telling you the price in US dollars of the basket of goods and services, whereas this is telling you price of a basket in Hong Kong dollars. So if you have this many US dollars, you can buy one basket of goods and services in the US. Okay? So that means if you have $1 US, then you can buy 1 over PUS of a US basket. That is the purchasing power of a US dollar. Okay? That's how much you can buy. It costs PUS dollars to buy one basket. So with $1, how much you can buy? 1 over PS of a basket. The inverse of the price level. That's a measure of the purchasing power. Now with 1 Hong Kong dollar, you can buy 1 over PHK of a Hong Kong basket. Now, suppose that S is the nominal exchange rate. It is the number of Hong Kong dollars needed to buy $1 US. That's the nominal exchange rate. So 7.8 for us. Then with S Hong Kong dollars, what can you buy in Hong Kong? Well, with 1 Hong Kong dollar, you can buy 1 over PHK. So with S Hong Kong dollars, you can buy S over PHK of a Hong Kong basket. Now S Hong Kong dollars allows you to buy $1 US. So when we say purchasing power parity, okay, this is the purchasing power of $1 US. This is the purchasing power of S Hong Kong dollars. So PPP says that these two should be the same. Okay, the purchasing power of $1 US should be the same as what you can buy with S Hong Kong dollars in Hong Kong. Right? Then we say purchasing power is equalized between the two countries. So if we rearrange this, okay. So we also call this absolute PPP. And the way to remember which currency is going to be at the top is you have to remember the unit of the nominal exchange rate. So here we are measuring the nominal exchange rate as the number of Hong Kong dollars per US dollar. So that should tell you that the numerator should be the price level in Hong Kong, because this is measured in Hong Kong dollars, and denominator should be the price level in the US, that's measured in US dollars. Okay? So that's absolute PPP. Now, if we express this equation in terms of percentage change, what should we get? Take the percentage change on both sides. What should we have here? Minus. Very good. So minus the percentage change in the US price level. Okay? And the percentage change in the price level is the same thing. What do we call this? It is the inflation rate. So this we call relative PPP. So relative PPP is based on changes, percentage changes, rather than the absolute levels of the prices. Okay. That's relative PPP. So relative PPP is saying, what is it saying? So suppose inflation in Hong Kong is 10%, inflation in the US is 5%. Okay? So Hong Kong prices are increasing faster than US prices. Then what should happen to the exchange rate between Hong Kong and the US? Should it appreciate or depreciate? It should depreciate. Right? The Hong Kong dollar should weaken against the US dollar if the inflation rates are like this. So then this would be 5%. Okay? So that means you need more, 5% more Hong Kong dollars to buy $1 US when inflation in Hong Kong is higher than inflation in the US. Okay, so that's relative PPP. This is absolute PPP. Okay. So absolute PPP, we have seen what this means. Relative PPP, when the depreciation of one currency relative to another matches the difference in inflation between the two countries. That's what we just saw. Okay. Okay, now the next important concept is that of the real exchange rate. So what do we mean by the real exchange rate? If the nominal exchange rate is simply the price of one currency in terms of another. Real exchange rate is the nominal exchange rate adjusted for relative national price level differences. So what is real exchange rate? So ER denotes the real exchange rate, let's say between Hong Kong and the US. This is the relative price of Hong Kong goods to US goods adjusted for the nominal exchange rate. So relative price of Hong Kong goods, so Hong Kong price level, to US goods, so divided by the US price level, and then adjusted for the nominal exchange rate. So we are computing the relative price when we express the prices in the same currency. So we put an S over here to make the comparison meaningful. The Hong Kong price level, notice that this is measured in Hong Kong dollars. The US price level measured in US dollars. And the nominal exchange rate, Hong Kong dollars per US dollar. So when we multiply S with PUS, we get the US prices in Hong Kong dollars. The US dollar will cancel out. So relative price of Hong Kong goods to US goods, adjusting for the nominal exchange rate. That is what we call the real exchange rate. The real exchange rate. If PPP holds, then the real exchange rate should equal 1. Okay. The real exchange rate should equal 1. Because then the Hong Kong price level should be the same as the US price level. And then you express them in the same units. But, so if you want to relax this somewhat, 1, saying that the real exchange rate should be 1 may be too strong, because, for example, the way these price levels are constructed, their base year may be different. Okay? So if you allow for different base year, then instead of being 1, this could be a constant. Okay? The real exchange rate may be different from 1, but should be a constant, at least. Okay? So we will talk more about that. Okay, so when PPP holds, the real exchange rate is a constant, so that movements in the real exchange rate represent deviations from PPP. Okay, so if the PPP were to hold, real exchange rate should be a constant. So if the real exchange rate is moving around, that means the nominal exchange rate is deviating from its equilibrium value as given by PPP, the ratio of price levels. Okay? So a discussion of the real exchange rate is really the same thing as a discussion of PPP. We are discussing why the real exchange rate is fluctuating, why is it moving around. That's the same thing as discussing PPP. Okay, so PPP, the term PPP was coined by a Swedish economist, Gustav Cassel, in 1918, but its history in economics is several hundred years old, goes back to the 15th and 16th century. So how did PPP begin, the idea of PPP? It's a really fascinating story. So in Spain, at the time, 500-600 years ago, the Catholic Church was very strong and influential. Okay? So the Catholic Church had decided that you could not charge interest if you give a loan to someone.